Welcome to the Building Design Primetime Podcast, focused on providing valuable information for anyone looking to undertake a new build or extension project. We'll share our tips, tricks and stories from a building designer's perspective.
Are you starting or am I starting?
Oh, I can start.
Okay.
We're going to talk about rural blocks.
Yeah.
Because you want to know all about them.
I do. I'd like a little hobby farm.
Oh, okay.
A couple of horses.
Only a couple?
Well, we'll
you
start.
snuck one in.
I
You're going to
snuck
sneak
another.
a couple more in?
You can't stop at one. It's impossible.
Fair enough. So rural blocks. Definitely a lifestyle choice. It's choosing, obviously, a block that, where it is, proximity, as long as you don't mind the travel. Things to look out for, I've found for rural blocks is the zoning right. In Tasmania, a couple of overlays within different council municipalities, they have, the state government's protective over what they call prime agricultural land. So you've got to double check whether the council allows you to do what you want to do. So if it's a vacant piece of land, if it comes under prime ag, it's in a certain classification, it still can be used as prime agricultural usage. You may not be allowed to put a house on there, a shed, a couple of chooks, horses and whatnot.
What if you want to grow stuff? What if you want to grow crops? Anything like that?
Without a house, without a shed. So that's the whole thing. As soon as you add driveways and all that, you're taking away the usage of it.
And that comes down to what land class it is.
Can do, and depending how the councils, so some of the council planning schemes, we've got the new statewide scheme. We've yet to see how that implements, how they've implemented that, or even if it affects it at all. But they are trying to protect agricultural land, not just using it willy-nilly for, residential, running dirt bikes and cars and stuff on really good land that can produce crops, stock, hold X amount of stock on it. So that's one of the first things you've got to check your zoning. The other side is, does it even have a water connection? A lot of them don't, so then you're going to be in tank water. You've got to consider, if you're going to put a house in there, you have to supply your own water, deal with your own sewage, and the expense of getting power to the house. We did one that was off the grid because it was ridiculous trying to get power to it. So that's becoming a little bit more common, off grid. All that comes to a cost, because compared to a normal house, you normally have all the services there, but with quite a number of rural blocks, there are no services. So it's a far more expensive build.
Yeah, right. And what about, so say for example, so recently I've looked at a block of land, really nice farming land. At the moment it's got cattle running on it. It's about 65 acres and it's classed as rural resource.
Yep.
What are the issues that can come up when you're looking at properties like that? Is building on that going to be a problem?
Could be. And that came down to that prime agricultural land. May not be permitted. Quite a few of the schemes have things like that written into it, so it has to be investigated. You'd certainly have that done prior to buying anything, not rather than taking the risk. Does it actually have access off the road? It sounds silly, but depending on what type of road it is, do you actually have an access point off the road, a legal access?
That's a good point. I don't think that block of land did. It had a dirt road off the main road, but it didn't have an access point into.
Yeah, and that might be the thing you have to apply for. It might be a state growth road, so then you've got to apply state growth for an access, or you may have to come off someone else's road, or there's all these things that you have to consider. So
it's not as simple as just buying it and plonking a house on there?
Far from it.
Oh.
Sorry. this is why you've got to do a lot of investigation beforehand, especially with rural blocks. Unless you buy one that's already got a house on it, that's by far the easiest way of doing it, because it's already got all that stuff on there. Might not like the house, I mean, just renovate it, knock it over, do whatever. You know, there's always all those options. Again, the expense of everything on a rural block is more expensive. Everything.
I guess you only got to look at, driveway or anything like that, because it's such a big property. If you're wanting to, whether you have a gravel drive, concrete driveway or whatever, are there limitations on what you can have?
Not really.
No.
It's how much you can afford, really.
So where do you look for information to find out all of this stuff about a block of land? Because quite often a real estate agent gives you very little.
Well, they'll give you the spiel.
Yeah, they're trying to sell something. Of course they'll give you the spiel.
Well, my favourite thing when I look into real estate, in a domain or something like that, they go, subject to council approval. They don't know, but they're trying to sell it. Potentially you can do this. So one thing is going to the council, talk to them, or talk to a building designer or an architect, and they can do the research for you on the block, because we can look at overlays that are available in Tasmania anyway on the list. A lot of that's available online. So we know the zonings, we know the overlays, we know even the Tasmania one's really cool because it does talk basic information about the type of agricultural land.
I know the one that I was looking at was land class 4, and it had limited cropping. I think you could use it for, but I think it was okay for running cattle and your livestock.
Yeah, could be, and then we'd have to go through an investigation, and then so your zoning is a big part. Are there any restrictions on the zoning? Are there any local restrictions that have been put on there? Where would you put the house? Where would you put your sheds? Where would you put your driveways? You're starting with a blank sheet too. There's a lot of work involved. And the big one a lot of people forget, yet it's really obvious, bushfire attack level. You're out in the sticks, might just look beautiful green pasture, but grass fires are a major issue. So you have to think about where the house is positioned, how you protect that, how you maintain around it to protect the house from a grass fire.
That makes sense. I know, just looking from, a horse property point of view, quite often, we're coming up to hay season, so that we leave the hay so that it dries out, and then you slash it, and that's obviously quite a bad fire hazard.
Of course it is, but it's a natural part of that's just one of those exercises you've got to go through.
Yeah.
When you've got rural land, it's pretty normal. Did you know you've got to allow for a fire truck to get up your driveway?
Wow, I'll have a wide driveway then.
Yep. Has to be wider, plus you've got to have a turning head to be able to turn a fire truck up there. Near the house, you always got to have a coupling that the fire truck can hook into, 10,000 litres minimum of water that truck has got access to, if they choose to go fight the fire on your property.
What about if there's a house that's already established and it's old, and obviously regulations would have changed in the last however many years?
Well, they keep changing every few years. We can't keep up with it half the time, because we keep getting all this notification. Yeah.
So do you still have to have access for a fire truck if you've purchased a property that is old and not have that access?
It's like saying, no, because it wasn't established back then. As soon as you do alterations and modifications to it that may trigger upgrading or getting an assessment done, then you will have to implement, put in a fire tank, put in the proper coupling, and maybe upgrading your driveway. Most likely upgrading your driveway to suit a fire truck to get there.
So it's going to cost a lot more.
Yep.
And the build, I guess, would be a lot more depending on a number of factors, including what the bushfire attack level would come back as.
Very much so. We've done quite a few where we know where the house is going. We recommend it. Keep it away from the boundaries. You've got an area around the house that you can maintain, and it's easy to maintain. Then the driveway costs you more, of course, because you've got to get the truck up there. But that's only one part of it. Say if you're 100 metres off the main road, which may have the mains power, that's 100 metres of, cable, electrical cable, either overhead or underground, that you have to pay for to get to your house as well.
Wow.
Yes.
I'm in for a lot.
That is a lot. And that one's a big one. I've seen people caught out with that. And that's why people are looking at off-grid as well. And we've got the technology now for off-grid is so much better. On rural properties, you wouldn't necessarily put solar panels on the roof of the house. You'd put it on frames that sit on the ground. So it's easy to access, easier to clean, easier to fix anything. And you can get so many more on the ground than you can on your roof.
And I mean, you'd have so much space too, I guess,
that's
on a
exactly
rural
right.
property.
Yep. You've got to put in a wastewater system. Now, everyone calls that a septic, but it's a different type of system. You may be allowed to run a septic. You may be able to run a wastewater treatment plant that is subject to an environmental health officer. Private environmental health officers do an assessment for you. You're going to be spending anywhere between $1,500 to $2,500 just for that report. If the soil is suitable, you might be able to put a septic, lots of trenches, on a 3-bedroom house. It might be anywhere between $20,000 to $25,000 to install that. So that's over and above like a normal house. If you've got a wastewater treatment plant, it may be that kind of dollars, maybe a bit more, subject to what's required. But then you have to go into a contract with someone to come and put chemicals in it every 2.5 months or 3 months. And that's part of the contract to keep the maintenance of the system working.
So you can't do that yourself. You have to pay someone to do it.
Yes.
Wow. Is
That's
it
to make
complex?
sure it gets done.
Yeah, okay.
So that'll probably cost you $1,000 a year for that.
Wow, that's a bit crazy.
It's always been that way. Human nature, we're always a bit lazy. We're not going to always maintain our own equipment. It's in the ground, you don't see it. So people forget about it. And if you don't put the chemicals in it, they don't work.
Yeah, it makes sense. I want to take a step back because you mentioned before about overlays, which obviously applies not just to rural properties, but what are they and how does that come into the process?
And that can affect every block. It could be anything from, the one I'm loving at the moment is the flight path overlay from the airports. I'm still learning about that in the new planning scheme. It could be landslip overlay, the scenic protection tourist corridor.
Yes, actually the block I looked at had that one on there.
Yeah, there you go.
So how does that affect it?
Under the new scheme, I'm not sure yet, but essentially you have to work through under the planning scheme to ensure. I suppose you're not going to do anything ugly, because they consider it as a tourist drive. So they generally encourage landscaping and a few other things like that. So don't put a shed up against the front of the block to make it look ugly, that type of thing.
So don't have a big statue of Frank Gaskets in front of your house?
I wouldn't. Literally, I wouldn't. I like that one down at Billong Bay, big statue of King Neptune out the front.
Yes, true.
That was fun doing that renovation for that one. That's an icon, that one.
It is.
Yeah, no statues.
Okay. Noted. Rock formations?
Yeah, maybe.
Maybe.
Yeah, so all these overlays do have a bearing, and some councils have their own. Launceston's a classic example where they have the cataract management, which Launceston is very protective over the cataract gorge and everything around it, and wants to ensure that it stays exactly the same as it is, and then development doesn't encroach on it. So they have some very strict rules around that, and you'll find that with other councils, they'll have their own specific things they wish to protect.
And so does each council have different regulations when it comes to rural properties? Like, how does that tie in, like, with the
I
planning
think that it's
scheme?
changing now to the statewide planning scheme. It should be pretty consistent across the board, unless there's specific council overlays or conditions that they wish to implement for that reason in that area.
Well, that makes sense because there are a lot of councils in Tasmania.
Oh, really? Half a million people? What, we got 28 odd councils and 28 planning schemes. Does my head in sometimes.
Oh, I can imagine.
And 28 different opinions on a planning scheme. and that's the challenge that we face every day. We deal with so many different municipalities, and we definitely see the difference in the quality of the service that we receive as well.
Wow. And so what else, when it comes to rural properties, should you look at in terms of, say, other things that might come up in the report? So,
yeah. Well, it's funny because it comes down to individual sites, because you could have a site that's full of trees, right? Yeah,
Yep.
it's a rural block full of trees. They may have a restriction on how many trees that can be removed.
wow. But you obviously will have to take some down probably to put a house on there.
Yeah, that's true, but who's to say that that might be part of that scenic protection or that tourist route, and they don't want chunks of trees taken out?
But then could it possibly contradict with something else, say like the bushfire attack
totally,
level?
Totally.
So how do you handle that when there's a conflict?
Poorly. That's all I can say. People jump in and buy stuff and they think they can build a house there, and really you might find a site that's just not suitable for it. Just shouldn't have bought it to try and build a house on. I have seen it quite a few times. People are buying it, haven't done their research, think it's wonderful. Real estate has sold them something that potentially subject to council approval, and you can't do it, or you can do it with extreme expense. So that's why it's buyer beware. Do your research, get someone in the know, get as much information as possible on that piece of land, on your piece of paradise in the middle of the boonies. You may not be able to build what you want to build.
I guess that can be a huge disappointment for someone.
Oh, yeah, and also in the hip pocket too.
Oh, definitely.
Just massive. You're stuck with a block you can't do anything with.
I guess one of the most popular things you see probably in the last 3 years since COVID is with all the mainland buyers coming and buying up all of our property, is when they purchase a property and realise afterwards, oh, you actually can't subdivide it.
Oh, yeah, that's a pearler. It's not just mainlanders. I've seen locals do that as well.
That's
Or even do a strata. You know, they want to go build an extra building on there and do a bit of development. Haven't done the research. They think they can do it, and the zoning doesn't let you, or planning scheme doesn't let you. You've got to do your research. And a lot of building designers, architects will be able to help you with that.
yeah. It sounds like it's quite a complex system. It's not always a black and white answer to everything.
Oh, definitely not.
From what I've learned so far.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely gobsmacking. And you're right. I've had people come in. I want to do this. We do a site analysis for them, and then we go through. Well, you can't do that, or you can't do as many as you thought you could do on there. So, the savvy person who wishes to start their own developments, and you really need to talk to the right people. And council will only give you a certain amount of information. It's not their job to do that. They give advice and all that, but it's very loose, and rightly so. They're not professionals insofar as they don't carry PI to give advice like we do. A lot of designers, a lot of architects, a lot of other specialists in the industry, surveyors, planners, building surveyors, they can all give levels of advice on this. So it's just the biggest tragedy I see is people see a piece of land that they get emotionally attached, they jump into it, they do a little bit of research, they're panicking around, and they buy it due to emotion rather than doing all the researching and understanding and reading all the potential challenges of that site. The other one, we had one down at the Huonville Council where bought a piece of land, wanted to put a house on there, found out it was part of a floodplain.
Oh, couldn't build it all?
I had to build the floor up to a certain level, then the foundations had to be designed and certified by someone that they can handle the floodwaters.
So that would have increased the cost of their build
Considerably, but also the floor level wasn't where they want it to be.
Oh dear.
Yeah, exactly, oh dear. And again, not knowing what they've got or what they bought, I should say.
So what's your recommendation for anyone looking to purchase a rural property? What's the first step? Where do they go? Where do they look?
I'd first go to the council. It's nice and easy. It's free advice just going in there. That will give you the basics that you need. If you want to get into real detail, engage a building designer or an architect. Building surveyor can help as well, and they can do a lot of background research for you. We do a lot of what we call site analysis for developers to have a look at potential, research a piece of land. Can I do this? What kind of yield can I get? What overlays are there? What are the connections like? Stormwater, sewer connections. Is there, power? Yep. Is there NBN? But we've had it before that where they can't find the sewer connection.
Oh, was it supposed to be on there?
It was a brand new block. They forgot, they didn't put it on.
Oh dear.
I kid you not. And that was fair dinkum. And it was all on, we found out via doing the research. Yeah.
Wow. So that will help, I guess, establish whether potentially it's a good block that you've purchased.
Yeah, exactly right. Rural blocks, I must say, are probably got the biggest potential pitfalls compared to normal residential blocks, because they're already set up to do, for residential, as the name suggests. Rural is a lot harder and a lot more expensive.
Depending on the zoning, I guess, as well.
It is, but even if you've got the perfect rural block, or acreage blocks as they sometimes call them, you have a few acres, they generally a lot of them don't have sewer connections, so you're paying for that wastewater. The distance to get your power to the house is longer. Same with your water and everything else. Your driveway is longer, all the rest of it. And that certainly adds up to it pretty fast. I've just researched for some friends just recently, and I've told them the site needs a wastewater and all that. And we worked out it's going to be another $45,000 to the build of the house. Now, if you've already got a tight budget, that's a lot of money.
Definitely.
Yeah.
That could blow the budget out.
It could do, without you actually realising. Make sure it actually has a water connection, because you might still have to put one on. Does it have NBN? Especially, and that's why those rural blocks, or blocks on rural living in some cases, a little bit further out, may not have all the services that you expect.
Don't tell my husband what I'm in for.
Well, you could go down that track. It was a good idea at the time.
Yeah, I know.
Yes, but research.
What a wonderful way to finish.
You're listening to the Building Design Prime Time podcast.